All right, we have a really interesting show for you today. You will not hear this anywhere else except for 6 months from now. That's how it works. We say it here first, and then 6 months later, everybody else is saying it. For instance, yesterday, the GOP failed to repeal and replace Obamacare again, and you can expect to hear a lot of people talking about Trump's legislative failures, and he can't do anything, can't get anything done in the Congress, even as he starts his new push for tax reform. But if you've been listening to this show, I've been telling you that Trump is winning two of the most important conservative fights there are. And suddenly today, this week at least, some other commentators, people who are not friendly to Trump, are catching on, which proves that the Andrew Klavan Show is where the future comes to rehearse. Also, we have the mailbag. Woohoo! All your problems will be solved. But first, many people think Donald Trump will be facing a real challenge in the next presidential election. Trump's approval ratings are climbing, but they're still low. And with the Republican Congress divided and incompetent and dishonest and cowardly and reneging on every promise they made for the last 8 years and divided and incompetent, Trump hasn't managed to get much legislation passed. So it's hard to see how he'll ever manage to win re-election, especially when you consider the powerhouse Democrat candidates waiting to run against him. For instance, there's Joe Biden. Biden, who would be 77 by the time he took office, recently told reporters, quote, "You whippersnappers may not remember this, but I used to be pretty doggone important around these parts, and I'll be darned if I don't know a trick or two you youngsters haven't thought of. Why, if I'm elected president, I'm going to appoint, what's his name, to be the, what do you call it? And that other guy, and he's right on the tip of my tongue. He'll do that other thing, that the one thing that everybody thinks is such a big deal," unquote. Another hard-driving Dem who wants to get in the race is John Kerry. Kerry would only be 76 when he took office and wouldn't turn 77 until the month after that. Kerry recently told supporters, quote, "If I'm elected, I'll tell everyone about that time back in 1967. No, wait, it was 1968. No, 67, that's right. Oh, wait, maybe it was later, like 69 or so. What were we talking about? Dag nabbit, never mind. The whole point is that I was Secretary of State under Barack Obama when I finally brought peace to the Middle East." And maybe that was a movie I saw once. Or maybe I was just thinking about it back in 2012. Or was it 2013? It was 12, maybe 13, unquote. And of course, you can't count out another run by Bernie Sanders. The socialist Sanders would only be 79 when he took office. Sanders recently addressed a crowd of Venezuelans who were either cheering wildly or begging for food. And he said, quote, "If I'm elected, I will put this country on track to follow the economic model of the Soviet Union, which is doing great, or was the last time I looked, which was on my honeymoon when me and my cutie pie tripped the light fantastic in Moscow, so everything there looked wonderful. My socialist policies will revive the America of my youth in the sense that we'll all be driving 1950 Thunderbirds again," unquote. So as we look ahead to 2020, all the Democrat candidates are raring to go, and each and every one of them is eager to do something, but they can't remember what it was. I'm sure it'll come back to them eventually. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shape, tipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
All right, it's mailbag day. Woohoo! Yes. Oh, you almost did it there. You almost had that Lindsay woohoo. We had the official Lindsay here, but she said she might come back, but I don't see her. I guess maybe she's out to breakfast. All right. It really is true. I mean, this is something. This has annoyed my wife and children for years. I am always right. I am always right. And it's so irritating. It is. It's so irritating that what people do is rather than admit that I'm always right, they tell me I'm wrong. They tell me I'm wrong. They tell me I'm ridiculous. And then about 6 months later, they just start saying what I was saying, and they don't give me the credit for it, which is fine. It's fine. So ultimately, you have a choice. You can watch this show and be annoyed by the fact that I'm always right and I'm saying stuff you don't like, but it turns out to be true. Or you can just watch other shows and find out the same thing 6 months later. One thing I'm always right about is stamps.com, right? Because just like anybody else, I do not want my day to suddenly come to a screeching halt, like one of those You know, do not want that to happen, to suddenly have to jump in my car, drive to the post office, wait online some more, and finally get the stuff that I need. Stamps.com brings all the services of the U.S. Postal Service and stuffs them violently into your computer so that they're right there at your fingertips. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, any class of mail using your own computer and printer. Stamps.com makes it easy. They'll send you a digital scale. It automatically calculates the exact postage, and Stamps.com will even help you decide the best class of mail based on your needs. I use Stamps.com, I really do, because I just, things just move too quickly, and there's still stuff you got to mail. You got to put it in the mail. The post office does a good job, but it's just slow. It's just far away. It's not always open. Lines are long. So that's why Stamps.com will solve that problem for you. And right now, you can enjoy the Stamps.com service with a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Go to Stamps.com and click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and slowly type in Klavan.
Please slowly spell that for me.
It's Klavan. No matter how slow you spell it, it's still quicker than going to the post office. Stamps.com, enter Klavan, Stamps.com, and you will never have to go to the post office again. Here are two things. All right, so I'm right about Stamps.com, but I've been right about Donald Trump. And Trump is a hard guy to get right because we haven't seen a politician like him before. And everybody gets so swept up in his eccentricities. And two things I told you about Trump. One, that one of the most important things he is doing is the culture war. He's winning the culture war, or at least he is winning it in a sense. And I'll get to more of that later. And people who say, oh, he's brash and he lies and he's this and he's that are missing the entire point. And the other thing I've told you about Trump is you can't get too fascinated by him as a person if you want to see the political landscape clearly, right? Because he kind of is like, he just blinds you with all his stuff, all his drama and his craziness and all this stuff. And he blinds you to what is actually going on. And especially when you have the press, this constant noise in your ear, both on the right and the left, if you ask me. On the left, they're just dishonest and corrupt, because on the left, they're telling you, they're giving you the news, but all they're really doing is selling Democrat propaganda. But on the right, they think that every moment they have to win everything. And if they're not winning everything at every moment, then they're being betrayed. It's a betrayal. And they don't even see, there's an old joke about the Jews are people who can't take yes for an answer. And that's what the conservatives have become like. So let me just run through a little bit of what's going on, right? I mean, first, the Trump administration today is proposing its new tax plan. People are already screaming about it. Is it raising taxes? Is it lowering taxes? I'm not going to talk about it today because it just came out, and these things are very complicated, and what Trump is proposing is not very detailed. Like, a lot of that is going to be written in Congress. So I don't want to just go off half-cocked and talk about it beforehand. But that's coming out. But it was another defeat for the GOP Congress. John McCain, Rand Paul, and Susan Collins shot down the Graham-Cassidy attempt to reform Obamacare. And I know everybody wants Obamacare repealed, and I keep telling you it ain't going to happen that way. But this was, I thought, a step in the right direction, moving the financing to the states, giving the states more federalist leeway, so eventually Obamacare, which is collapsing, would be allowed to collapse. So here's Lindsey Graham announcing that this isn't going to happen, but it will happen eventually.
It's complicated. It's difficult politics. Instead of quitting, you allowed us to move forward. And oh my God, how far we've come in such a short period of time. To President Trump, thank you for engaging. To Vice President Pence, you have moved mountains. Governor Pence has shown us that with flexibility, governors with the right attitude can improve quality. It's called Healthy Indiana. So the leadership team has done everything we've asked them. We're coming back to this after taxes. We're going to have time to explain our concept. We'll have a better process, and we're going to take this show on the road. I've been up here 20 years. I've never enjoyed anything more. I believe this is the most important thing I can ever do for the country, working with my colleagues, is not to just repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with a system closer to where you live, controlled by people you can vote for. And we're going to get there. To my Republican colleagues, we're going to fulfill our promise to repeal and replace. To the American people, we're going to improve health care for you. because at the end of the day, that's the only promise that matters.
Okay, that's one thing that happened, and it feeds into this narrative. Trump can't get anything done. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not about legislation and all this. The other thing that happened was that Roy Moore, the judge, the very, very conservative, God-fearing, pistol-waving judge, won the primary, the Republican primary, to replace Jeff Sessions as senator from Alabama. And it was a very bizarre thing because Trump was backing Luther Strange, who was essentially Mitch McConnell's establishment candidate, and Roy Moore is the wild man who's kind of thought to be more like Donald Trump. Here's what you're going to hear about this. You're going to hear, one, that it's unimportant. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really prove anything. And the other thing you're going to hear about it is that, it might be better for Republicans if Moore lost the general, because they don't want to tarnish their brand with this wild man who opposes gay marriage and who puts the Ten Commandments on his, won't take the Ten Commandments down even with a federal court order. Lost judgeships twice because he wouldn't obey the feds. Both these things are nonsense. It is an important thing. First of all, it's a major, major victory for Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was down there with Sebastian Gorka. He was campaigning for Moore on the basis that even though Trump was backing the other guy, Strange, that Moore was the more Trumpian candidate. And remember, Bannon said when he left the White House, I'm going to be fighting for, and Sebastian Gorka said this too, he said, we're going to be fighting for MAGA. We're going to be fighting for the reason Trump was elected, what people are calling Trumpism rather than Trump. And this is a big deal because Trump is watching this stuff. Kushner told him to back Moore. Kushner has been wrong about virtually everything that he's told him to do. Keeps telling him to go with the middle ground, the establishment, and keeps being wrong. But this is also a message to Congress, which is messing up. The GOP Congress is doing nothing. If they fail on tax reform, they've already failed on Obamacare. They say they'll come back to it. I actually believe them. I do believe they'll come back to it if they don't lose the majority. But still, this is a message to them, and it matters. So this is a victory for the Trump movement, the Trump attitude, the Trump culture. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. Now, meanwhile, if you're watching the left is desperate. Okay, they had this NFL thing. It blew up in their face. They think, oh, we're showing everybody what a racist is, continuing the racist narrative. It's all about race. They keep selling this thing that anything about, the NFL, it's race, race, race. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. I mean, it's just these people disrespecting the flag. So now they start in. They did nothing but cover the NFL. And suddenly they say, why isn't anybody talking about the hurricane in Puerto Rico? It's like, because you're talking about the NFL. That's why. So now they're selling, Hurricane Katrina, for those of you who don't remember what happened, they kept doing this to Bush too. Everything with Bush was a scandal. Bush would say, hello, good morning. That was a scandal. Bush would walk down the street. That was a scandal. Whatever Bush did, it was a scandal, and it didn't touch him. And then they got Katrina, and they got him. He made a mistake. He didn't take care of the optics, and they got him. So they're praying. They're just praying that's going to happen with Trump because so far nothing sticks. So listen to this montage of them selling you the idea that the hurricane in Puerto Rico is Trump's Katrina.
It's not the presidential leadership we've come to expect. And part of the question we got to confront is Maria Donald Trump's Katrina?
Sure, Michael, what do you see? Do you see the president focused as much as he needs to be in Puerto Rico?
No, I don't. And originally being from New Orleans, I had a lot of family members that were actually impacted by Katrina. And under the ordinary set of circumstances, I would probably say this would be the quote-unquote Katrina moment for Donald Trump. But unfortunately, I'm not certain there's much of anything that would push his base against him. But
and we should be hearing more about that than we're hearing.
Is this Katrina? Is this Katrina?
It could turn into Katrina or something worse than Katrina.
To spend less time on putting out tweets and more time in addressing this humanitarian crisis, because this is going to turn to be Mr. Trump's Katrina.
So dream on, CNN. Dream on. This is they hope it is. They hope it is. It ain't. I mean, Trump defended himself. He pointed out quite rightly that it's it's harder to get supplies to Puerto Rico than it is to Texas and to Florida. The administration has been doing a good job with these hurricanes, and they will amp it up. And he's going to go and visit them. I think visit Puerto Rico next week, and I just don't think this is going to make it. So here's the thing. Well, you know what? Before I do that, let me talk about. Let me talk about air filters, because I know what you're thinking. I'm having a hard time paying attention to this because I'm worried about my air filters. I have to tell you, I don't think about air filters either. I never think about them, okay? We had a heat wave here this summer that went on and on and on and on, and we had the air conditioning on constantly, and not only was it expensive, but the filters get messed up, and people spend a lot of their time indoors where the concentrations of pollutants are like 2 to 5 times higher than they typically are outdoors. So if you're not changing your filters, now, like I said, I don't think about it, but they keep dust level down, they keep all the germs from coming in, not the germs, they keep the air from soiled air from coming in. And if you have asthma or allergies or anything like that, filters are all important. I don't think about it either. But Filter Easy thinks about it for you. That's what they do. Filter Easy thinks about it for you, and they solve the #1 problem with home air filters, which is forgetting to change them. The average homeowner changes their home air filters 1 or 2 times a year, but the minimum you should do it is 4 times a year, so you get a physical reminder of having clean air in your home delivered to your door. They will deliver it right to your door, the exact size home filter to your door when it's time to replace. This way you won't ever forget to change the air filters in your home. Again, you can save 5 to 15% on home air conditioning costs by keeping your air conditioning and heating systems cleaner. And by the way, that's another thing. When I got the bill for that air conditioning, it was like I got chills all over again. It wasn't just the air conditioning, it was the terror at looking at that bill. You can also save on maintenance on your air conditioner. Get started today. FilterEasy.com is offering all my listeners their first delivery of standard 1-inch air filter for free with free shipping. You'll never forget to change your air filter again. You'll never forget to change your air filter again. Visit FilterEasy.com/Klavan.
It's a new sponsor. They spell it right.
That's right. If you go on FilterEasy.com and you don't spell it Klavan, you will not get this free deal. So enter promo code Klavan or you can enter promo code Klavan on the homepage at FilterEasy.com, and they will send you a standard 1-inch air filter for free with free shipping. And this way, you just don't have to think about it. I know you're not thinking about it now, but this way you don't have to think about it, and you'll get the air filter. So we're going to begin by, truth comes in funny places. I want to pick 2 guys who do not like Donald Trump. They don't like him at all. One guy on the left, one guy on the right. And I'm going to start, shockingly enough, at the New York Times. A stopped clock and a former newspaper are both right every now and again, right? So let's start by going over to the op-ed page, or as we call it, Knucklehead Row.
Oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh. Let's go waltzing down to Knucklehead Row.
Okay, here is David Brooks, who hates Trump. He calls Trump the Abby Hoffman of the right is Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if you guys remember Abby Hoffman, 1960s. He was what they called the Yippies. They were even beyond the hippies. And he was the leader of the riots that took place at the 1968 Chicago Convention. He was a radical. So here's what David Brooks says. It has to be admitted that Donald Trump is doing exactly what he was elected to do. He was not elected to be a legislative president. He never showed any real interest in policy during the campaign. He was elected to be a cultural president. He was elected to shred the dominant American culture and to give voice to those who felt voiceless in that culture. He's doing that every day. I mean, this is living proof that everything ultimately becomes the Andrew Klavan Show. You can be reading the New York Times. They will try to resist. They'll attack everything I say or any idea that goes through my head. Then suddenly the New York Times is the Andrew Klavan Show, except we've already moved on. We're already giving you 6 months in the future. David Brooks goes on. What's troubling to me is that those who are the targets of his assaults seem to have no clue about what is going on. That's absolutely right. And also the people who are being helped by his assaults sometimes don't even know. When they feel the most righteous, like this past weekend over the NFL, they're actually losing and in the most peril. And here is he describes what's going on. He says, after World War II, the Protestant establishment dominated the high ground of American culture and politics. That establishment eventually failed. It tolerated segregation and sexism, led the nation into war in Vietnam, and became stultifying. So in the late 1960s, along came a group of provocateurs like Abbie Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, and the rest of the counterculture to upend the Protestant establishment. They never attracted majority support for their antics, but they didn't have to. All they had to do was provoke, offend the crew-cut crowd, generate outrage, and set off a cycle that ripped apart the cultural consensus. Here's Abbie Hoffman. Here's a quick cut of Abbie Hoffman at the '68 convention explaining what he's doing.
That's essentially what we're going to do, is throw a lot of banana peels around Chicago and have the machine stumble. And when it stumbles, it gets into a policy of overkill, and it starts to devour itself.
So the cops are going to turn on themselves?
Or they'll at least, they'll be fighting other people in power. See, in Grand Central Station, they weren't just clubbing us long hairs, you see. They started to take on commuters, you know, and people coming home from the opera, and mayor's officials who were wandering around, and FBI agents who were there in secret, disguised as hippies. They're all getting clubbed just like us.
Okay, so that is exactly what Donald Trump does. He puts out banana peels and watches his enemies slip on it. Remember, all during the primaries, he's doing it now, all during the primaries, he would do things, and it was not that he destroyed people, it was people destroyed themselves because of what he was doing. All right, Brooks goes on and says, the late 1960s were a time of intense cultural conflict, which left a lot of wreckage in its wake, but eventually a new establishment came into being, which we will call the meritocratic establishment, people like David Brooks, right? This establishment, too, has had its failures. It created an economy that benefits itself and leaves everybody else out. It led America into, he's talking about the elites now, he's talking about himself. It led America into war in Iraq and sent the working class off to fight it. It has developed its own brand of cultural snobbery. Its media, film, and music industries make members of the working class feel invisible and disrespected. Through David Brooks, through the medium of David Brooks, people who read the New York Times are now hearing the Andrew Klavan Show. Okay, they don't know it, but they are. So in 2016, Brooks says, members of the outraged working class elected their own Abbie Hoffman as president. Trump is not good at much, but he is wickedly good at sticking his thumb in the eye of the educated elites. He doesn't have to build a new culture or even attract a majority. He just has to tear down the old one. And that's another thing I keep telling you, that we're in a place where things are falling apart. The gravity has left the room. All the furniture is floating around, and we don't know where it's going to come down. But think about it for a minute. Sure, it can get worse. Things can get worse. But it's so bad for Republicans. We were in this place where the GOP was doing what they call in baseball, losing comfortably. Our democracy was slipping away. Our independence was slipping away. Our federalist structure was all slipping away, and the right and the left were both sitting there. The Republicans were putting up John McCain for president. John McCain. They were putting up Mitt Romney. I mean, they were not putting up the people who represented anybody, not the right, not the intellectual right, and not the base right, nothing. And so it was just all slipping away. It was all so easy, and destroying that culture, shaking up that culture, is a win for us. I'm going to continue this on the other side, but I got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. The mailbag is coming up. The mailbag. All your questions are going to be answered. Your miserable life will be turned around, changed, maybe for the better. It's a lousy $10 a month to get your questions in. With that $10, you can watch the entire show at thedailywire.com and not be cast out into the exterior darkness. If you subscribe for a year, it's a lousy $100, and you get the Leftist Tears tumbler, which will continue to fill up with what I'm going to say next.